Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I realized that the first video was going on almost into 30 minutes, so I decided to stop it. So let's go ahead and continue. I'll start off with this slide I forgot to present earlier, and this is the difference between Durkheim and Merton and what they believed as far as the concept of anomie and strain. So it's important to keep in mind that Durkheim believed that anomie was caused by a society that's transitioning too fast to maintain its regulatory control over members. And remember, it doesn't matter if it's a good or a negative transition. And that's why we use the example of the Great Depression, which is a negative transition with the stock market crash of 1929. And then we also use 1960s when the economy was good. There was also individuals who exhibited strain. Then Merton believed that anomie represented too much focus on the goals of wealth in the U.S. at the expense of the conventional means. And this is what we were last discussing in part one of this presentation. Now, Merton did go on to say that individuals, particularly those in the lower class, eventually realize that the ideal of the American dream is a lie, or at least a false illusion for the vast majority of people. So, for example, people can work very hard in school and then get stuck in jobs that will never produce the type of material success promised to them through the American dream they were socialized to believe in. Now, this revelation of truth will most likely take place when the people are in their late teens to mid-20s, and this is actually when crime tends to peak, when we look at the age crime curve. So according to Merton, this is when frustration or strain is evident, right? And as I was saying, it's consistent with the peak of offending at the approximate age of 17. So with that said, some individuals begin to innovate ways that they can achieve the goals of society. And these goals, remember, is material success without having to use the conventional means of actually obtaining them. So what does this mean? So this means that they're going to obtain those goals through criminal activity. Now, it's important to keep in mind that not all individuals are going to deal with strain in the same way, right? After all, keep in mind that most people who are poor do not resort to crime. So to Merton's credit, one of the good things about his theory is that he explained that individuals deal in different ways with the limited economic structure of society. And Merton referred to these variations in dealing with the revelation of the economic structure as adaptations to strain. There are 5 adaptations in which we're going to watch this video on that discusses those adaptations.
Might be necessary. Some societies can have more or less of it than others. To help explain the difference, American sociologist Robert Merton proposed in the 1930s and 40s what he called strain theory. Merton argued that the amount of deviance in a society depends on whether that society has provided sufficient means to achieve culturally defined goals. In the US, financial success is one of the strongest culturally defined goals, and the means of achieving it include things like getting an education. So what we call the American dream, the idea of working hard to achieve financial stability, is a prime example of what Merton called conformity, achieving culturally set goals by way of conventionally approved means. Go to school, get good grades, graduate, get a good job, work hard, get rich, success, right? Well, of course, even if wealth is your goal, this approach isn't an option for a lot of people. Many who are raised in poverty, for instance, lack a realistic path to prosperity. And if you don't have access to the means, like money for an education or good-paying job opportunities, then the goal will be elusive too. So one response to the lack of acceptable means is to use unacceptable means, that is, deviant ones. Merton called this innovation, but here innovation means something a little different from what you're used to. Merton used it to describe deviant solutions that people come up with to reach their goals. In this case, it could be everything from petty thievery to organized crime. The goal is still financial success, but the illegitimate means used to get there make it deviant. Now, you might also respond in the opposite way, by giving up on the goal, in this case economic success, and instead committing totally to following the rules. You might decide that you may never be rich, but at least you're not going to be deviant. Merton called this ritualism, a deep devotion to the rules because they are the rules. Of course, your other option is to reject the whole system altogether, the means, the goals, all of it. In this kind of response, which Merton labeled retreatism, a person basically drops out of society, rejecting both the conventional means and goals. Merton classed drug addicts and alcoholics in this group because he saw these addictions as a way of escaping the pressures of the goals and means. But rejection can also be constructive. Rebellion is a rejection of goals and means, but in the context of counterculture, one that supports the pursuit of new goals according to new means. The artist who doesn't want financial success, but instead pursues recognition from their peers, is an example of this. So the structural functionalist perspective on deviance provides some useful ways of thinking about how deviance works on a macro scale. But it works on the assumption that everyone who does deviant things will be treated as deviant. The other paradigms of sociology call this into question. They point out that social status impacts how deviance is punished, or whether it's punished at all. For example, a symbolic interactionist understands deviance through what
So that was a very good summary of the adaptations to strain developed by Merton. Here is a good table that conceptualizes that. I'm not going to get any more in depth into this subject. So let's go ahead, and now we're going to look at Cohen's theory of lower class status frustration and gang formation. Now, in 1955, Cohen presented a theory of gang formation that used Merton's strain theory as a basis for why individuals result to such group behavior. Now, in Cohen's model, young males from lower classes are at a disadvantage in school because they lack the normal interaction, socialization, and discipline instituted by educated parents of the middle class, which is in line with Merton's original framework of a predisposed disadvantage among underclass youth. Now, according to Cohen, these youths are likely to experience failure in school due to this lack of preparation and conforming with middle class values. So they fail to live up to what is considered the middle class measuring rod, which actually emphasizes factors like motivation, accountability, responsibility, deferred gratification, long-term planning, respect for authority and property, and controlling emotions. So similar to Merton, Cohen actually emphasized the youth's internalization of the American dream and fair chances for success, leading to frustration when they fail to be successful according to this middle class standard. Now, this strain that they feel due to failure in school, performance, and respect among their peers, often referred to as status frustration, leads them to develop a system of values that is contrary to middle class standards and values. Now, some have actually claimed that this represents a Freudian defense mechanism known as reaction formation, which involves adopting attitudes or committing behaviors that are the opposite of what is actually expected. So it's a form of defiance and avoidance of guilt for not living up to the assumed standards. Now, according to Cohen, these lower class male youths will adopt a normative value system that defies the very values they're expected to live up to. So specifically, instead of abiding by middle class norms of obedience to authority, school achievement, and respect for authority, these youths will change their normative beliefs to value the opposite characteristics. Namely, they value malicious, negativistic, and non-utilitarian delinquent activity. So for example, these youths will begin to value destruction of property, skipping school, not because these behaviors lead to a payoff or success in the conventional world, but simply because they defy the conventional order. Think about it. They turn the middle class values upside down and consider activity that violates the conventional norms and laws, and thereby psychologically and physically rejecting the cultural system placed on them without benefit of equal preparation and fair distribution of resources. So, furthermore, Cohen also claimed that while these behaviors do not appear to have much utility or value, they're quite valuable and important from the perspective of the strained youth. Specifically, they do these acts to gain respect from their peers. And their peers are going to be those who have gone through the same straining experiences and reactionary formation, which they could not gain through school performance and adherence to the middle class normative culture. So, with this in mind, Cohen stated that he believed this tendency to reject these middle class values is the primary cause of gangs, because a number of these lower class individuals who had experienced these same strains, like status frustration and experiences, form an actual group. And a classic example of this is the birds of a feather flock together. So Cohen claimed that not all lower class males resort to crime and join a gang in response to the structural disadvantage. Um, but with other variations beyond that, you're going to have the delinquent boy, the college boy, and the corner boy. So the college boy responds to his disadvantaged situation by dedicating himself to overcoming the odds and competing in the middle class schools despite his unlikely chances for success. Whereas the corner boy responds to the situation by accepting his place in society as a lower class individual who will somewhat passively make the best of life at the bottom of the social order. Now, compared with Murden's original adaptations, Cohen's Delinquent Boy is probably most similar to um, the adaptation of Rebellion, because this delinquent boy is going to reject the means and goals. And remember, these means and goals are the middle class values and success in school. So he's going to reject those means and goals of conventional society and replaces them with a new systems of means and goals, which are the negative behaviors and peer respect in a gang. Now, some would argue that delinquent boys should be seen as innovators because their goal is to essentially gain peer respect, but the peers involved changed. So we argue here, we're going to make the argument that through the reaction formation process, the delinquent boy actually creates his own goals and means that can go against the conventional middle class goals and means. So in regards to the college boy, the adaptation that seems to best fit is conformity, because the college boy continues to believe in the conventional goals, which are financial success and achievement, and the means, which are the hard work and education or labor of the middle class society. Now, finally, the corner boy probably best fits the adaptation of ritualism because he knows that he likely will never achieve the goals of society. So he essentially resigns himself to not obtaining financial success. But at the same time, he does not resort to predatory street crime, but instead holds a stable blue collar job or makes ends meet in other typical legal ways. Now, there are some criticisms because of the findings. And it's because at the time when Cohen developed this theory, there was official statistics show that virtually all gang violence, as most gang violence for that matter, was concentrated among lower class male youths. Other studies have also been critical of this particular theory by Cohen, particularly the portions that deal with his proportion that crime rates will increase after youths drop out of school and join a gang. Although the findings are mixed, many studies have found that delinquency is often higher before the youths drop out of school and may actually decline once they drop out and become employed. Now, some critics have pointed out that such findings discredit Cohen's theory, but this is not necessarily true, because delinquency may be peaking right before the youth drops out of school, because that is the time when they feel the most frustrated and strained. Instead of when delinquency may be decreasing after they drop out, because some of the youths are raising their self-esteem by earning a wage and taking pride in actually holding a job. It's important to keep in mind that still studies have clearly shown that lower class youths are far more likely to have problems in school, and that school achievement is consistently linked with actual criminal activity. So in addition to that, there is little dispute that much of the delinquency represents malicious, negativistic, and non-utilitarian activity. And an example of this would be that what do individuals have to gain from destroying mailboxes, right? Or like tagging a wall, doing graffiti. And this is an act that will never gain much in the lines of money or any other form of payoff aside from actual peer respect. So with this, we're going to go ahead and transition into Cloward and Olin's theory of differential opportunity. So after Cohen's theory, 5 years later, Cloward and Olin presented another theory that's going to come from the structural strain theory of gang formation and behavior. Now, similar to Murden and Cohen, these two researchers assume that all youths, including those in the lower class, are socialized to believe in the American dream, and that when they realize they are blocked from conventional opportunities, they become frustrated and strained. Now, what's different about the theory of these two individuals from the previous string theories is that they emphasize three different types of gangs that form based on the characteristics of the social structure in the neighborhood. So, to be clear, the nature of gangs varies according to the availability of illegal opportunities in the social structure. So, in the previous string theories, they focus only on the lack of legal opportunities. And this model here, presented by Cloward and Owens, is going to emphasize both legal and illegal opportunities, and the availability or lack of these opportunities largely determined by what type of gang would form in that specific neighborhood. And this is why it's coined differential opportunity theory. So, according to this theory, the three types of gangs are criminal gangs, conflict gangs, and retreatist gangs. So here you have the three types of gangs presented in front of you. So criminal gangs are those that form in the lower class neighborhoods that have an organized structure of adult criminal behavior. And these neighborhoods are so organized and stable that the criminal networks are often known and accepted by the conventional portion of individuals in the area. The adult gang members in these neighborhoods are going to mentor the youth and take them under their wing. This can pay off for the adult criminals because you could have the youth do what's called the dirty work for the criminal gang without risking serious punishment if caught, compared to if the adults were caught. Now, the successful adult offenders supply the youth with the motives and techniques for committing the crime. So while members of the criminal gangs are blocked from legal opportunities, they're offered quite a bit of opportunities in the illegal world. So due to strong organization and stability of such neighborhoods, criminal gangs tend to reflect this high degree of organization and stability. Therefore, criminal gangs primarily commit property or economic crimes with the goal of making profit through illegal behaviors. These crimes can range from anything like running numbers, right, as local bookies, to fencing stolen goods, to running businesses that are a front for vice crimes like prostitutions or drug dealing. So regardless of the type, they all involve making a profit illegally, and there is often a system or structure in which the criminal activity takes place. Um, these type of gangs are going to be most similar to Merton's adaptation of innovation, because the members still want to achieve the goals of conventional society, and that is going to be financial success. So if you're asked, what criminal gangs mostly engage in, you're going to say that their purpose is going to be um, essentially to make money, right? And a good example of these criminal gangs has been depicted in movies. Think of The Godfather, A Bronx Tale, Goodfellas, right? There is a highly structured hierarchy, and money is always moved up the pipeline, meaning up the hierarchy from the bottom up, because the leaders are going to make money by their foot soldiers on the street. Then you have the other type of gang that Clark and Olin, identified, and that's the conflict gang. Now, conflict gangs tend to develop in neighborhoods that have weak stability and little or no organization. The neighborhood often seems to be in a state of flux because people are constantly moving in and out of the area. So because of that, the youth in the neighborhood do not have a solid crime network or adult criminal mentors like they would within the criminal gangs. So they tend to form together as a relatively disorganized gang. Now, because of this disorganization, they typically lack the skills and knowledge to make a profit through criminal activity like they would in a criminal gang. So the primary illegal activity of conflict gangs is just violence. This violence is used to gain prominence and respect among themselves and their neighborhood. But since they're disorganized, in nature, themselves and the neighborhood, conflict gangs never quite achieve the respect and stability of the actual criminal gangs. So according to these researchers, conflict gangs are blocked not only from legitimate opportunities, but also from illegitimate opportunities, unlike the members of the criminal gangs. So when we apply Merton's adaptations, conflict gangs would most likely fit under the category of rebellion, mostly because mostly because no other category fits well. It can be argued that conflict gangs have rejected the goals and means of conventional society and implemented their own values, which emphasize violence. So good examples of these type of gangs in Hollywood would probably be Menace to Society or Boys in the Hood. Now, if an individual is a double failure in both the legitimate and illegitimate world, meaning he or she can achieve success in school or status in a local gang, that person may join other such people to form a what's called retreatist gang, and this is the third type of gang. So retreatist gangs are made up of those individuals who have failed to succeed in the conventional world and also cannot achieve status in the criminal or conflict gangs of the neighborhood. So because members of retreatist groups are not good at making a profit from crime, right, like criminal gang members are, or they're not good at using violence to achieve status like those of conflict gangs, their primary form of offending is going to be using drugs. Now, like Merton's adaptations, this is probably going to be um, the retreatist adaptation. When we apply Merton's adaptations, it's going to be the retreatist adaptation. So members of the retreatist gangs often simply want an escape from reality. Therefore, the primary activity of the gang is usually getting high, which is well represented in movies like Train Spotting, Drugstore Cowboy, and Panic in Needle Park. So again, criminal gangs make a profit, conflict gangs, violence, and retreatist groups, drug use. Now, there were a number of studies and critiques of this theory in particular, with much of the criticism being similar to that of Merton string theory, specifically that there is little evidence that gaps between what lower class youth aspire to and expect to achieve are predictive of feelings of frustration and strain, or that such gaps are predictive of gang membership or criminality. Now, another criticism of this theory is the inability to find evidence that supports their model of the formation of the three types of gangs and their specialization of offending. Now, some research supports the existence of gangs that appear to specialize in certain forms of offending, and many studies find that the observed specialization of gangs is not exactly what these two individuals proposed.